right.
Oh,
Go
stop
ahead.
it a second.
No, we're
Oh,
good.
well, I picked a card out of those cards, I was showing you the other day.
Yeah, yeah.
And it was this one. Can you see her? She's got a
Uh,
drum.
yep. Drum medicine. Okay.
Yeah, it's drum medicine. And it was about being in the mother's womb and the rhythmic thump of the heartbeat linking you into the world.
Oh, wow.
And how beautiful and consistent the measure of sound that connected you to your life force and brought your spirit into form. The medicine of the drum is here to steady, ground, and rewire your nervous system
Nice.
so that you may find balance again. In times of chaos, stress, and disarray, it can be challenging to bring ourselves back to a regulated state. This time in your life is calling for balance as you have been pushing yourself past your capacities in all ways. The medicine of the drum comes forward for you to bring you back to your most natural rhythm. The ancestors step forward to sing a drum song that calls you back to peace and calm. The words of the song are sung in the oldest language of your lineage, and although you might not understand them completely, your blood memory does. This is a deeply healing card for you to choose, and your whole system settles. The best of the drum balances your heart, adrenals, and breath. Regulation is key to your wellness. You are worthy of healing. And when I picked it, it was like, what are we doing here? You know what
Right.
I'm saying?
Yeah.
What are we trying to help or accomplish or be part of?
Yeah.
And this is what I got. The affirmation was, I'm brought back to balance by the beat of the drum. My whole system relaxes with every vibrating sound.
Nice. That's beautiful.
I really like that. Anyway,
Definitely appropriate for what we're doing here.
that's what I thought. So I wanted to share, forgot I wanted to share it with you.
Yeah, no, that's cool. That's
Yeah.
cool. I'm just gonna leave that in. I think that is a great start. But to kick off, thank you for being here. Thank you for being my first guest. And I'm gonna just read this little quick bio for the listeners so that they get a feel for who you are. And they can also go to your website, www.marilynedwards.com, to learn more, book more sessions, if possible, with you if they feel like it. But Marilyn is a modern day medicine woman, a multifaceted professional dedicated to holistic well-being, healing, and reawakening our connection to nature. An intuitive healer with 30 plus years of experience, Marilyn combines a natural healing ability and intuitive guidance with the power of grace, alternative healing methods, neuroscience, body-centered therapies, and nature's energy to guide individuals toward a holistic being. Your diverse background, which I find immensely fascinating, has created a life experience of before entering the healing field, included your career as an artist, a shoemaker and repairman, commercial fishing vessel, and tugboat captain, which that thing should be turned into books and movies in and of itself, showcasing your ability and wide range of skills. Academic background in art, you studied art in college, which nurtured your creative talents and deepened your appreciation for aesthetics. You're a certified practitioner in multiple healing modalities, which include certifications in neuromuscular therapy, Reiki, compassion key, coaching, aromatherapy, and more, which enables you to offer a comprehensive approach to healing. And you're a passionate advocate for authentic living and connection to the earth. You're committed to healing and creating a new paradigm for living on earth where people create and live joyfully, nurture their connection to all life. You do this by assisting others to break free from limiting beliefs, past traumas, to live authentically in harmony with your bodies and nature to feel their true potential. Your unique blend of life experiences and professional expertise make you a compelling guide for those seeking holistic healing and personal transformation. So there it is, everybody. That's Maryland in a nutshell, but there's very, very much more. Uh, that come into play. So what I'd like to do is start just off from the beginning. Um, where did Marilyn grow up, and what was your early childhood like?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
This is going to be kind of fun, I hope.
Yeah.
And I hope it offers some insight for people too, to help their lives. My dad was in the Air Force, so we
Okay.
moved a lot. I've lived in Kansas and Texas and Florida and Maine and, all over the place. And so that was a little difficult moving all the time as a child, but I think it gave me a good background in understanding different kinds of people. So I'm grateful for that now, though
Yeah.
probably not so much as a kid. I loved being in the woods and I loved painting and drawing and making things. That was really, I always thought I would be an artist.
Okay.
And so, and I was also pretty spiritual, like I liked church, but not in the churchy kind of way. Like I would go to, my mother let me go to all kinds of services. I had friends of all different faiths and I went to all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Um, Never limited me in that way, my father either. And so, but I can remember like sitting in church sometimes and hearing like beings speaking to me. And I never said anything about it. I didn't know. I didn't grow up in a kind of atmosphere where people talked about those kind of things or
Right. Right.
helped you with those kind of gifts. So I didn't know whether it was unusual or not, or it just was part of my life. Or if I went into the woods, I could hear things. And so I just kind of went about being that kid, playing, moving, doing all the things I did. I can remember one thing though, like feeling constantly sort of like when people would lie, I would know they were
Yeah.
lying, or I might say something to them that was revealing their lie, and then they told me that I was wrong.
Right.
Words weren't matching what they were saying, the feeling of what they were saying. And so that was really difficult for me. It made me feel a little bit crazy inside, like
Yep.
I was always wrong, but some part of me knew I wasn't.
Yep.
And so that onward in life, that created quite a bit of unhappiness for me and self-doubt and lack of self-esteem, really. Because I was pretty smart. I did well in school, all that kind of stuff, but I was always like doubting myself because what my sensory perceptions were letting me know were not being validated by the people outside of me because everybody likes to hide what's really going on. And because I could kind of see they didn't like it.
Yeah.
So sometimes people thought I was a know-it-all, or. And
Right.
so I started to retreat. I started to retreat into myself.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then I had a time when we moved in fifth grade where it it was a wonderful teacher who helped me really open up my art skills, but I was put in a class that what I wasn't matched for educationally. Like I was pretty advanced in my studies and they put me in a slower class. So I got super good grades and everybody else would fail. So then this girl went around and told everybody to hate me. So I also got to
Oh man.
enjoy that for a year. So that was interesting. It just made me much more sensitive though to people's feelings and treating people well. But it also, I became quite introverted after
Yeah.
that, more introverted. So then, yeah, went through high school, skipped my last year of high school, went to college, was an
Okay.
art major. Parents didn't like that. I was supposed to be a scientist. I mean,
Ah,
it goes on and on.
okay.
And so then I became an artist. I dropped out of college and I became an artist. And
Yeah.
I made my living doing that for a while. And I was at a pretty young age, somewhere around 20, I think.
Yeah.
I was in galleries in New York City, and invited to be in some big shows and stuff like that. And that's about the time I bought the shoe repair shop because I wanted all the equipment. And then my father died. So that was another thing that kind of doused the flame of creativity in me.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah.
And that's early on as well. It's not a whole life experience up to that in terms of worldly experience, so to speak.
Yeah.
So the effect of starting your creative career and then bam, your dad passes away, and so you have to deal with a scenario of grief and emotion, and which are all things that play into creativity in a way. Those are exp ways of expressing emotions for you kind of got turned off to an extent.
Yeah, I really shut down quite a bit. Like I had an invitation to be in a show. I used to make these one of a kind sculptured handbags, and I had invitation from the American Crafts Council Museum to be in a show called Homage to the Bag. And it was going to travel all over the United States.
Yeah.
And I couldn't get it together to put my things together for the show
Wow.
because my grief was so intense. And on top of it, my mother, I found out at the time my mother was an alcoholic. She had been really hiding it, and
Mm,
it just came roaring to the forefront.
mm,
So I was there dealing with I didn't live at home, but I'm dealing with my mother and her grief and her alcoholism, and then my own grief, about my father's death. My
right.
brother left and went to California. My sister lived in New York. So yeah, it was a pretty intense time.
Wow. Wow. Okay. So at this time you got the shoe repair shop
Hmm.
going on. And how did that um potentially bring back some of that creativity that you felt that just the art component was stifled with? Were you
Well,
able to feel
yeah,
into that?
I had originally bought that um, so that I could do my work, have my own shop because I had worked for somebody else in their shop before that.
Okay.
And it had every piece of equipment I could ever want to do all of the leather parts of things that I did anyway.
Yeah.
So when all of that happened, I started repairing shoes.
Gotcha.
And so I spent about a year or so repairing shoes, but I had already learned how to make shoes and sandals and all that kind of stuff too. So I did all of that. But most of the creative stuff went by the wayside. And then I decided to go to Switzerland.
Okay.
And I met some people and I lived over there for about a year and a half and worked there just as a waitress and cafe manager.
What prompted the thought that Switzerland was going to be the place that you went to?
Well, and it wasn't really going to be. I met these guys and a girl from Switzerland and they invited me. So I went there initially, but the thought was to travel on down to Italy to this leather school
Okay. Okay.
where they did all kinds of things. And I really didn't have a ton of money, so I was limited. And so it was easier to get a job in Switzerland,
Right.
to get a visa and work and stuff. So I thought, well, I'll work for a while and then I'll go down there. And I never ended up going.
Okay.
Yeah, I just stayed there and worked and traveled around and then decided to come back to the States and stay. I could have
Okay.
gone back, but I didn't. I decided not to.
Gotcha. And about the time that you're coming back to the stage, about what age range are you at in that period of time?
God, that's a hard one. I want to say about
Mid 20s?
25, yeah,
Okay.
somewhere
Yeah, yeah. All right.
20.
So you get back to the States, and are you still thinking, all right, I'm going to keep doing shoes, or are you starting to think I'm going to venture into some other direction?
Well, I met a guy who had been living in Denmark who had opened a leather shop here in town. So I thought, well, I'm going to go back to doing my one of a kind things and try to get that going again. So I started working with that and I was working part-time or, as a bartender and a cocktail waitress, I think. And I met these people and we did some shows, like we did the New Orleans Jazz and Heritage Festival and some different things like that. And so I was starting on that, getting that going. And then I met some people who were building shrimp boats.
Hmm. Okay.
and I had a fear of the ocean. So they were taking one of their new boats out on a maiden voyage, and I said, oh, I'll just go try to conquer my fear of the ocean.
That's a bold move.
And yeah, I never did. 11 years on the water, I never
Oh
conquered
my
the fear
word.
of the ocean. I I realized I had a good reason to be afraid of the ocean, in all honesty. So yeah, but anyway, so I did that, and I went out with them, and then we ended up two state, like in, I don't know, South Carolina, North Carolina, I can't remember now.
So
And
when
so
you,
I decided to quit my job, and I stayed working on the boat.
all right, so when you came back from Switzerland, you came back to Florida. That
Hmm.
that became the home base at that point.
Yeah,
All
it's
right.
always, yeah, it's been.
Okay.
But I think I liked the working on the boat because it was hard physical work,
Hmm.
and it was like a meditation for me.
Oh wow.
Like you're out on the water and you didn't have to communicate with a lot of people. As I said, I had become a lot more introverted. And so you didn't have to communicate with a lot of people. You were around a lot of nature, even though it was hard physical work. And I don't know, I liked being away from everything.
Yeah.
See, probably why I did it.
Got you. Okay, because
That and the dolphins.
right at that point you're on the water most of the time,
Yeah,
and you're not really surrounded by what's happening in society, um,
right.
completely with what's going on when you're doing that. Uh,
Yeah.
and so, did you, from that maiden voyage, did you start working, or did you just decide, okay, I'm just going to become a captain?
I worked on a boat for 2 years before I became a captain.
Okay. And what all does that type of work entail?
It's backbreaking work.
Which, again, this is why I find it so
It
fascinating.
requires being very tough.
Yeah, this portion of your life is what just fascinates the heck out of me because you as a female, you you don't traditionally think of anybody working on a ship other than men. But
True.
you as a female stepped into this to potentially overcome some fear, realize that you like the work. It was a meditative experience for you in the form of the process of what you're doing. But again, you're a female, and there probably wasn't any other females on that boat, right?
Well, my friend's husband owned the boat, so she was on there and she had
Okay.
worked on boats. What I'd say back then is mostly if a woman was on a boat, she cooked and cleaned and maybe helped on the deck a little, but she didn't, you know, do full-time deckhand work like I ended up doing.
Okay.
And I guess it was back, because there's several books out now by women who have captained boats and stuff, but I was before all of that.
Okay.
Um, but like, like the Perfect Storm
Yeah.
book and that woman who captained, this was long before the Perfect Storm.
Gotcha.
So, and I think there's a woman shrimp boat captain in Texas or something that finally wrote a book. But anyway, when I started running boats, after I'd been on the boats for a while. One thing is for me, the other thing I thought I'd mention is I got physically really strong.
Okay.
And for me, that helped me
Yeah.
have more confidence in going out into the world. So I think there's something to be said about being really strong in your body
Hmm.
and knowing that you can do things
Right.
instead of helpless.
Yeah.
And so I learned how to do a lot of things and I got really strong. And for some reason, that boosted my self-esteem in a way.
Yeah.
Um, it helped me. And it gave me a lot of the tenacity that I have now because you went through some hellacious experiences. And if you didn't stay present and focused, you could
Yeah.
be done.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was probably one of the main things about that. That and
Okay.
just sort of being in tune with nature, like nature's cycles. Like I could smell the wind and feel the breeze and just look up and I'd tell you in a minute what it was going to do.
Right.
In the areas that I worked in, the weather would say something and I'd go, no, it's going to do this.
Right. Right.
It's different. You get really in tune with the earth.
Right. So even with so the way I'm seeing the storyline is the intuitive information that you had as a child, which I think a lot of creatives probably have, and I know personally I relate to that as well because I had things that I was experiencing intuitively, and I was being told that something different, and so that was always something that I had to deal with personally. Even was it was like nothing made sense because I was being told something was different from what I felt and thought that it was.
Right.
Um, so with being on that shrimp boat and working and getting that strength, that helped you kind of move past some of that feeling of um, not being heard or not being seen and feeling more in tune with your body, which when you have some physical strength about you, that gives you a bit more courage to be able to just do stuff because you feel capable at
Right.
that point in time. So that's an interesting line of connectivity up to that point that I'm seeing, and I believe that's what I'm hearing coming from you as well.
Yeah. No, it's really true. I think people overlook how valuable that can be.
Yeah,
Like especially nowadays, I'd say because I see, younger people, a lot of them don't know how to do anything physical. I'm not saying they're not smart. I'm just saying they don't know how to take care of themselves.
right.
And I think there's a certain type of value in being able to do a few things without having to run to whomever.
Yeah, yeah,
Just simple things, just basic things. There's something about that, plus being physically strong enough to lift 50 pounds or whatever if you need to.
yeah,
It
exactly.
really is useful. And it changes at least it changed something inside of me. And
Yeah,
I wasn't like a weakling or anything, but I became very much stronger. Like I could lift steamboat ratchets when I ran tugboats. You had to hook barges up to tugboats with these steamboat ratchets, and they weighed almost 100, they weighed 100 pounds. And at the time I weighed 115 pounds.
right.
So I was lifting, routinely 100 pounds over my head and putting it up on the barge. And everybody thought when overheard them talking about me in a restaurant one time when the guy first hired me that there was no way I could do the job because I wouldn't be able to lift the steamboat ratchet. I remember.
Somebody,
Yeah.
somebody denying your abilities again.
So I walked over to the table and introduced myself. I wouldn't have had the courage to do that before I had run all the other boats,
Right, right,
But
exactly.
there was something about facing adversity all the time too, because no one thought I could do it.
Yeah,
I mean, people did some really underhanded things to me. They would unhook my gear. I mean, seriously, there were some really underhanded things done because one, they didn't want me there.
yep,
And two, they didn't think I could do it in the first place. And then when they saw that I could do it, that made them mad. And then there were some people that really thought it was cool and helped me out.
right.
Beginning, those were few and far between. So you got a lot of rejection. Like
Yeah.
I can remember I would just be quiet as a church mouse, and I'd go on the radio and there were two people that would talk to me. And that you communicate back and forth out there by radio with everyone. And so if I went on a radio channel where all these guys were talking, no one would talk on that channel for 3 days.
Oh my word.
Yeah. So there was a lot of rejection that I had to deal with,
Yeah. And
and a
that,
lot of keep going in the face of that. Yeah.
yeah, and that's a statement to resiliency, that I think plays into a lot of storylines for people. The fact that there's this inner desire to kind of go further when we're faced with those types of things. And not everybody can, not everybody is able to in those moments.
Yeah.
Um, but for your storyline, that's showing that resiliency early. I mean, it's huge in your storyline because the resiliency of being a woman in basically a man's world, just for the simple fact of the need to be strong, need to be physical, need to be um, a little bit fearless, even though you were doing it to conquer the fear. You have to have a little bit of fearlessness in order to do that, and to be surrounded by that male dominated situation, basically, just because of its industry itself. Which it's fascinating to me because um, it's so much of a heroine story. That female, it's like this superwoman type theme to an extent.
Well, like looking back on it now, like I have a belief, I guess, and this is my own belief,
Yeah.
um, that some of us have had many lifetimes. Like, how can I state it? Like when you divide things sort of masculine and feminine, for me right now, the world is extremely masculine. And I don't mean that in a bad way. It's just, it's the masculine that's been sort of disconnected from the feminine. It's just all mind and go, go, go and achieve, 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 and all these kind of things. So I think we need to bring it back into balance. And I think that's happening. But I think that some of us have soul histories of being more on the other side of that and really sort of being mistreated or undervalued for many, many lifetimes.
Yeah.
So, and I think that I was one of those people. And for me, this was the thing that needed to heal, like whole second chakra, lower Dantian issues.
Mhm.
And so part of what I think I gained by doing that, which it seems sort of outlandish when you think about what I do now, was I faced the demon.
Mm.
What I perceived in my own mind to be the demon,
Right.
all this masculinity and all this lack of belief in me and, all of this stuff. The
Right.
only problem is like when I did it, I turned into a man. Like I gained a lot, and I think a lot of women back in the day when women started, becoming more liberated or whatever, did that. Like we didn't know how to be powerful in a different kind of way than the what we saw.
Right.
And so we just decided we were going to do it better than them
Right.
or
Right.
whatever, which is what I basically did.
Right.
And so it was good though. I mean, like I said, I found a strength. I found out I could speak up. I stood up for myself. I did all kinds of things that I might not have done so easily otherwise because I had to. I mean, I
Yeah.
literally had to. Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. And just to give a little bit of context for the listeners, that belief system in the past life scenario, a lot of people don't always subscribe to that just because they feel um, that there's only one life and this is all you get, kind of a
Yeah.
thing. But one of the things that I've learned over my own healing journey is that that does play into effect, and you can look at it from different perspectives. If you want to look at it from a scientific standpoint, which is where a lot of people tend to shift into, if it's not something that is understandable to them, they may shift into science to see if it makes any sense. But with mental health and different things like that, there's been studies that are done that are showing that some of the trauma experiences are ingrained in the DNA of the
Right.
human body. And so that gives just a little bit of perspective to the listener in terms of um, your belief system of being able to have many lifetimes and experience many lifetimes, and even me myself at this point, I've come to realize that those things are truthful, and those are truthful for me as well. But for those that are not able to grasp that or sense into that in any way, if you just look at it from the perspective of certain things that you're experiencing in lifetime might be stuff that is ancestral or that's passed down through your familial DNA, if you have a family history of it. So a lot of doctors are looking at family histories to try and understand what's happening to a person present day. So I just wanted to give a bit of context there,
Yeah, and that's true.
for somebody who might not subscribe to that, but yet
Yeah.
want to understand it.
And and that's fine with me because I think, well, I think like the more you know you don't know a darn thing. I mean,
Right.
you're just open to looking. And like the past life stuff came to me. I didn't go looking for it. So that's why I sort of started believing that that was a possibility. And somebody gave me that book, Many Lives, Many Masters.
Yes, Dr. Brian Weiss.
Yeah, Weiss. He that was a good book. Um, but anyway, and also if you look at it through quantum physics, it could just be alternate dimensions.
Right.
So it could all be happening at one time. So we could get really off the cliff on all of that. And I think was it Popular Mechanics just came out with an article on your brain and how there's several scientists, one a Nobel laureate, who are trying to prove, one guy's an anesthesiologist, the other guy was a Nobel laureate, trying to prove that your brain connects into all of consciousness through there's microtubules in your neurons and there's tubulins in your microtubules. And they think that's how, so they're trying to actually pin down the actual physical part of us that connects into the sort of all that is.
Right.
And so there's all kinds of information available to you when you slow down enough to listen and tune into that. So,
Right.
and there's also lots of proof. I mean, I could give you examples of people I've worked with in healing where ancestral trauma was affecting their body. And when we cleared the ancestral trauma, the pain in their body went away.
Right. And that's amazing. That's amazing. We,
Yeah.
you and I have experienced that as well. Um,
Yeah.
Even more information for the listeners. We've been working on me and with me for about 8 years now. And I can say at this point, absolutely, I have progressed on my healing journey exponentially over the last 8 years that you and I have worked together, um, compared to 25 plus years of just being focused in psychotherapy or cognitive therapy or any of the other traditional medicine modalities that are out there for depression and anxiety and that type of stuff. So that's why it's a pleasure for me to have you on as my first guest. It's also a pleasure to have you as a friend and continue working with you because it really has changed my life. And it's almost, I don't have words for it almost because it's just a drastic shift that took place when we first started working together. Um, So, and we'll get to more of that in a little bit. But what I want to do, I want to circle back to being on the boat, the shrimp boat and the tugboats. With that, were you working for a company that had the boats, or did you own your own boat?
No, I worked for a company that
Okay.
had boats because most of those boats are, back then probably three to 600,000. Now they're over $1 million.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. All right. So
a
you
real
do the
business.
right. You're just working as a regular hand for the first 2 years. And what what was the kind of the pivot point where either you decided or somebody else decided, hey, you're now going to be the captain?
I went up north to work on a friend's scallop boat, and
Which
we
side of
got
the North?
Yeah, well, out of New York, but work in the Grand Banks and things like that. And
Okay.
we got caught in a winter storm with 60, 70 foot seas.
Oh, wow.
Where we almost died. And so that's like the perfect storm. I
Yeah.
can't watch that movie. I still can't watch that. Somebody gave me that book and I said, "Why would you give me this book?" Years ago. I'm like going, no, I don't really need to read it because I lived it.
Yeah.
So after that, I think I was kind of tired. I went back down to Florida, and I worked on the shrimp boats for a little while. And then I had to have a surgery. I had an ectopic pregnancy.
Okay.
And after the surgery, I couldn't work for a while. And then I thought, no, I really need to be doing something else. Because one thing is when you're out on the water all the time, it was great for many years. And then it was like my whole life was passing me by. Friends were getting married, for some friends were dying, uh, having babies, and I was never there.
Yeah.
And so I decided I thought about becoming a medical doctor.
Okay.
And then I thought, and then I thought, well, maybe I'll just become physician's assistant because I'll be, 90 years old by the time I become a medical
Right.
doctor.
Right.
And I talked to my mother's doctor and he goes, "Oh, you'll just be a frustrated doctor, so you might as well go to med school." And then I was talking to my chiropractor and he was like going, "Why do you want to be a medical doctor?" And I said, "Because they need alternative people in that field."
Yeah.
He said, "Well, why don't you go learn the alternative stuff first?"
Ah, okay.
And he wanted me to become a chiropractor.
Gotcha.
So he had it all laid out where he had a house up where I could rent while I was in chiropractic school up in Atlanta, all this stuff if I wanted to do it. And I decided to go to massage school to just be able to make some money while I was going to chiropractic school.
Okay.
And during that, everything started opening up.
Ah,
My hands really took off. Like I've always kind of had healing hands, like animals were always attracted, all of that, but like they really turned on. And
yeah.
I started going to classes because I didn't really understand what was happening to me. And I was introduced to a kind of work called One Brain that helped you to work with how your brain and body store emotion and release it and all of that. And I took that very seriously, became certified in that. And as I did that, my life just started changing.
Hmm.
And all kinds of things started opening up. Like I was always intuitive, but I became super psychic.
Okay.
All this stuff happened. And so one thing after another. And then when I finally, when I got out of school, I decided I don't really want to go to chiropractic school. I like spending time with people. I don't want to do the rack 'em crack 'em thing. And back then there weren't a lot of people doing um, like network chiropractic or applied kinesiology or the slower kind of things that people do that aren't just regular chiropractic.
Right.
And it's changed a lot since then. So I just decided to have a massage practice, which was mostly postural reintegration and healing work with the neuromuscular therapy. Like I never had just a massage practice. I always worked on people who were in pain
Okay.
or who were messed up. And so sometimes they weren't healing.
Right. Right.
That drove the journey on into, well, what keeps you from healing?
Okay.
And, it was pretty obvious to me the emotional stuff and the tension stored, in their emotional and mental bodies, but also in their nervous system was what was preventing it. So I went on to learn different types of techniques, to help deal with that.
Right.
And it
Right.
kind of blossomed from there.
Okay. And from there, did you end up finishing chiropractic school and then either working for somebody or starting your own thing?
I never went to chiropractic school. I decided not to. And I
Okay.
opened my own massage practice.
Gotcha. Okay. All
Yeah.
right. So again, you're doing that entrepreneurial scenario um, where you did with the cobbler and the shoe repair uh, business.
Yeah.
Um,
And the artist thing. I mean, I made my living doing the artwork before that.
yeah, yeah,
I was in someone else's studio, but it was like percentage. We were paid by percentage. I wasn't paid a salary.
right,
What sold is how, so it was like, I don't know what I don't know how I would say that, but anyway, it was like working for yourself. You just didn't own the building.
right, right. Okay,
And
so you kind of had studio space.
yeah, so you paid him a certain percentage for having the studio space and all of that, and then you used it, but you were still basically on your own.
Right.
You know,
Yeah,
yeah,
exactly, exactly.
yeah.
Well, even to that point, if you're in New York City at that time and you're making art and you're making a living
Mhm.
doing it, that in and of itself is profound because the art industry in New York City is cutthroat.
No, I was in Florida.
Oh, you were in Florida.
The
Okay.
way I ended up in New York in the gallery was the lady sent out letters all over the United States soliciting people's work.
Ah,
It was
okay.
open, it was Julie's Artisans Gallery on Madison Avenue. And she closed down a few years ago, so she was in business for a long, long time.
Right,
And so you sent in slides and a bio and all of that.
right.
And she accepted my work. And then I went to New York City to meet her,
Okay.
feeling like a country bumpkin, really. I mean,
Yeah,
seriously.
sure.
To her penthouse with white carpet and white sofas and white everything. I'm like going, what am I doing here? And she
Right.
took my work. And she
Okay.
was the nicest person. She was super nice, very
Yeah.
sweet lady. And so that's how I ended up with my work up there. And then that's how the American Crafts Council, which if you're a crafts person,
Uh-huh.
I wasn't doing fine arts, even though I had some training in that. But if you're a crafts person, at the time, the American Crafts Council Museum was like the big hoo-ha for craftspeople.
Right.
And it's in New York City.
Right.
And they were invited me to be in homage to the bag that was going to travel all over the United States. And I was invited to be in a couple of books, all this stuff. But that all fell apart when my father died because I couldn't meet the commitment.
Right. Right. Okay. Okay. All right. So then we're back into the starting the massage therapy, starting working with that. Your intuition's opening up even more so.
Yeah,
You're realizing that you have more gifts than just the intuition. You're saying that you have the ability to start helping people heal and actually being a hands-on healer, um, which is is it's in and of itself, it's something that's fantastic from my perspective. Especially when again, I have the comparison of looking at traditional medicine, which is basically I knew for most of my life, and then finding the healing arts and the healing modalities that are not necessarily associated with traditional medicine. They're kind of like an alternative to that. But from my perspective, if they were to be integrated even more so as companions, I think we'd see a huge shift in the healing of the world in and of itself, because we would be a little bit more focused on actually healing than just maintaining,
right,
getting a person to just being maintaining their sickness, their illness, their aches, their pains. We get to a place of actually moving beyond that and getting them to healing, and which would change the whole dynamic. But with that, you're experiencing these shifts and that type of stuff. And are you thinking, okay, I may need to do more than just the massage component at that point in time, or what's the thought process in that?
oh yeah, I mean the thing that came to me was like one, just trying to understand like the energy work because the energy just started pouring out of my hands. And my friends or people I was working on, like, what are you doing?
Right, right.
I'm like going, I'm not doing anything. It's just happening, it just started opening up. And so that's so I took the Reiki classes, but I could already do it,
Yeah.
what I'm saying? But then it helped me understand it better. And so that would happen. And then, I took the one brain stuff, which really helped me understand the emotional component
Okay.
and the ancestral component and all of that. And this is years ago. I mean, this is long before you hear all about this stuff now, but this was before it was mainstream. And I kind of had to fight again, thinking
Yeah.
people are going to think I'm crazy.
Yeah.
And, it's interesting because when you think that, then that's what you get in your office. You get these people who think you're nuts.
Yep. Yep. Exactly.
And so then I worked on that. Like, okay, what part of me thinks that if I do this, people are going to think I'm nuts when I know it works and can help them. And then as I cleared that fear, then people who wanted to work started to come in.
Yeah.
And I got all of these VPs of a bank here in town. Like, it was like crazy because I asked Spirit, I said, I want to work with people where my work will have a trickle down effect.
Yeah. Yeah.
So then all those showed up and all kinds, but and the whole time I'm working on myself. I'm continually working to recognize and heal patterns of behavior I'm seeing in myself.
Yeah.
And I want to say this while we're talking about this because there's a lot of people who become very enamored of like what I'll call alternative gifts,
Sure.
ability to heal, psychic awareness, clairvoyance, clairaudience, all this kind of stuff, right?
Right.
And so they go take all these classes to try to learn this stuff.
Yeah.
And so, for example, I did not do that.
Okay.
I was very focused on healing my life, healing my heart, bringing myself more to love in every way that I could.
All right.
And as I did that, the gifts opened up more and more and more.
Mm.
And they were really true, clear gifts. They weren't screwed up. Like I always tell people, like psychics, you can take someone, and I said some because of their trauma, not because they're terrible people, but because if they have unhealed trauma, because a lot of times trauma will make you psychic. You're like pulling it out of your body, trying to figure out what's going to happen next to keep yourself safe.
Okay.
And so, a lot of psychic people, self included, at one time, had a lot of personal trauma. And so I always say some psychics can see under the crack in the door and
Yeah.
tell you what they see there.
Right.
And then some people can look through the window up at the top and they can tell you what they see there. And some people know how to open the door a little crack and tell you what they see there. And some people can know how to open the door
Right.
and just, you know, and usually they're more accurate because what they're seeing isn't colored emotionally
Right. Right.
by something. And we all have some emotional coloring. I'm not saying that, but you're more accurate the more you heal your own life.
Right.
And so I always try to tell people that because I went through periods of time, people being jealous of my abilities, all kinds of stuff. And I'm like going, you have no clue what this is like.
Right. Yes.
Trust me. That tsunami, remember last week all about that tsunami that was 20 years ago?
Uh-huh.
I was sick for 3 weeks before that happened
Yeah. Yeah.
because I could feel I was very busy, so I didn't know what it was, but I could feel something coming. I said something really bad is coming. I can feel I couldn't eat for
Yeah.
3 weeks. So, it's not all that in a bag of chips.
Right. And I think most definitely. And I think too, that's something that the listeners can see from a different point of view as well, if they look at it, is that just because somebody is in that position of being able to heal or doing healing work, whether they're a doctor, they're a psychiatrist, they're a psychologist, whatever, or there's somebody like yourself who's doing the alternative stuff a lot, but incorporating some of the scientific elements into it. They, it's a perceived notion that there's nothing ever wrong with them or nothing ever bad
Oh,
happens.
yeah.
But yet the alternative point of that is that you just experience things way more intensely than
Yeah.
what some of the others do. And then, I mean, you have doctors that, have alcohol problems. You have some doctors that end up getting hooked on medications because of pain of some of the injuries that may occur on the job and long hours and stuff like that. You have psychiatrists who have to go see a psychiatrist because they're listening to everybody's problems all day long and trying to help them, but yet, that energy that gets built up in them taking all that information in, that needs to go somewhere.
Right.
So they've got to go out and try to get that moved through and work through that and understand themselves even of having to deal with that. It harkens me back to the very first psychologist that I worked with. And I only worked with him probably a couple of months. Um, and I was getting to the point where I was feeling comfortable enough to start opening up about different things. And when I started doing that, he himself had depression, and he was starting to experience a phase within himself that he knew, okay, I'm gonna have to pivot here. I'm not gonna be able to help you any further because I've got to take care of myself a little bit. And then he directed me to the psychiatrist that I worked with, and I worked with here for over 25 years, Dr. Stipik. And she was wonderful, very wonderful, because the thing about her that I appreciated most was the fact that she was willing to allow me to look outside of everything that she provided,
Yeah.
um, because I was always curious about, well, what if this can help, or what if this could help? What are your thoughts on this? And sometimes she would just flat out tell me, I don't understand what you're talking about or what that modality is, but I'm open to, you doing that, and we can come back and discuss it and talk about it, and it'll be a learning experience for me. But she was very open to allowing me to do those things, which helped me to continue on my own path. Um, but getting back to you're experiencing all of these things that are coming in, intensely feeling them and opening up and healing within yourself, and it's starting to allow you to be able to even look at more potential modalities or things that you would want to start working with, or how you could better help other people. Because at that point, you're asking, can you just allow my work to be a trickle down effect to
Right.
where if you've got these VIPs and these VPs coming in that are seeking help from you, that can trickle down to the people that they know, or trickle out, even ripple effect, so to speak.
Yeah. And so that was kind of nice. And that continued for a while. And then I also remember that my body started getting really stiff. And I would go to my chiropractor and she'd go, like, what's wrong with you, Marilyn? Like, you're usually so easy to adjust. And I said, I don't know. And I started having a lot of people show up in my practice who had been abused as children.
Okay.
And so I just didn't know what was happening. And I finally, what did I do? Oh, yeah, I remember now. I went to a cafe and I sat down. I remember sitting down and all this stuff. And then the next thing I know, there's like a muffin and a coffee and all this stuff coming to me. Only I don't remember from the time I walked in the door until the coffee and the muffin showed up.
Okay.
So, I was having like these blackouts or whatever.
Hmm.
And I thought, well, but I was also well enough along my path that I knew that was screwed up. You know what I'm saying? I'm like going,
Right, right.
okay, I don't know what I'm getting into here, but this is big and this is big trouble. I knew I needed to get help. And I think perhaps I had done enough healing, got myself strong enough to face this part really. And so it started bubbling up. And I would have like for like 6 months, I had like this coughing, And anyway, I flew my friend from Arizona to see me, and um, and oh, by the way, folks, I did not have a lot of money to do this with. Just FYI. This was scraping together all the time what I needed to get this done. So, because I know what it's like to be, you know, shackled by some of these things, and you're not like super rich a lot of times.
Right.
So,
Right.
um, I want people to know that, but it somehow would happen.
Right.
And she got to stay at a friend of mine's beach house, so she didn't have to pay to stay, and we did the sessions over there, and she did hypnotherapy, but she never led the witness.
Okay.
So I did 3 days of intensive hypnotherapy. And basically what I saw was some sexual abuse by my father when I was like 3, 4 years
Mm.
old.
Oh
And he
wow.
was drinking. So it wasn't like he was a pedophile, but he was drunk. And so, because my father used to drink pretty heavily when I was young. And then the craziest thing was I would go home and I had two dogs. One was a male, one was a female. And Bert was the male, and he never did, how male dogs will sometimes hunch a female. He never did any of that stuff.
Okay.
And when I got home, because one of the things I'd seen was an oral thing. So, and I'd always had TMJ and I'd always had tonsillitis and all kinds of
Mm.
stuff as a kid. It's really interesting that all that was part of the scene. But he started humping my female dog in the head
Oh wow.
over and over and over and over again. And he was like, I could telepath to that dog. He was like the most, I could just say it in my head and he'd go do it.
Okay.
So we were very connected. So I knew that, or I felt anyway, that that was Spirit's way of telling me that what I had seen was true.
Right. Okay.
Because he was just showing it to me right in front of my face. And it really saved my sanity. Because I can remember being hypnotized and going, well, my head wants to say this. Because I couldn't touch the feeling of it. It was way too dangerous.
Yeah.
But I had to be honest and
Yeah.
say what was actually coming. And so that was about all I could handle of that once I saw it and recognized it. And it took about a year for the rest of it to come up. And I ended up on the side of the road thrown up
Oh
and
wow.
I called my friend to come pick me up and drive my car.
Mm.
And so it took all that time for that to come out of my body.
Wow.
And I didn't have any real support from family. I won't go into all that, but there was
Sure.
very little support. My brother didn't disbelieve me,
Okay.
but other people did. And
Gotcha.
so, but there was no real support. So it was a really difficult time. And I would go sometimes into feeling wake up feeling like I was 5 years old and terrified to go out into my own living room.
Yeah.
There was some really, I think one reason I can help people is I really have been to some incredibly dark spaces inside myself,
Yeah.
really scary spaces, and come through it. So, but I always had, like that day, I remember a friend of mine from Atlanta who was psychic calling me up and going, "Are you okay? You've been on my mind." And I'm going, "No, I can't even walk out into my own living room."
Right.
So she had me come up there. She had healers at odor sessions. She took me around and gifted me all these. So the healing came as long as I was open to receiving, somehow finding the way, one way or another, help would come.
Yes.
And so, but I really, sometimes I would like crawl myself out of that hole and I would feel like I'd have like hanging on to the edge of the hole with my fingertips and I'd feel like somebody came along and stomped on my hands and I fell back down into it. And it was a dark hole.
Yeah.
And then one day I went to see my friend, and I've told you this, but that's
Hmm.
the time I went to see my friend for a session. She did this biofeedback device, and she looked at me, she said, Marilyn, have you ever considered the fact that you're addicted to pain?
Oh
And
wow.
when she said that, I can remember I wanted to kill her.
Right.
I was trying to do everything. You know how you feel like you're just trying everything and nothing's really getting you there.
Yeah.
But something clicked in my brain, and I said, she's right. Like some part of me, whether it's through my ancestors and all the grief and the sadness and the stuff that's happened to them in their lifetimes, because there's been a lot of that in my family lineage.
Yeah.
Whatever it was, I was like addicted to pain. Like,
Mm.
and you actually do get physically addicted to pain. You get addicted to the biochemistry of it. So
Yeah.
I I really went to work on that. And that's when I started really kind of breaking out of that part of that. And as I did that, my gifts increased further. You know, at the time I could put my hand on you and I would see a past life and you would see it too.
Right.
Often, not always, but often.
Yeah.
Or, those kind of things. And then it became where I could put my hand on you and I'd see a timeline going by, like multiple faces, and maybe ancestor, maybe lifetimes. It doesn't matter to me, but multiple scenarios where this pattern of behavior was in place.
Yeah.
100, you
Yeah.
know? And then for a while it was like I was taking, I don't know, like circuit boards. Like I was taking a circuit board out and putting another circuit board in. That's what it felt like for a long time. And then this sort of crystalline energy came and things started to shift. Because up until that time, and I think people might, if they've ever tried meditating or whatever, they have a sense of like kind of going out of their body, like they're kind of seeing visions and seeing all this stuff.
Right.
That's how it was. And then all of a sudden it started to become an inward journey, a really inward journey. And
Okay.
during all this time that all this was going on too, I actually quieted my mind. Like I actually spent 6 and 7 hours a day meditating to be able to walk out of the house.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
during that period of time, I went through like all these levels of consciousness where certain things were true. But when you kind of move to the next level, this wasn't so true.
Yeah.
Like, like first grade, 1 + 1 is 2, and then, you get on up into trigonometry. So as I moved up, and then there was finally a place where the only thing that was left was just like what I call love, agape love, that peace that passes understanding place where there is no thing.
Right.
And when my mind let go and everything burst into that,
Yeah.
my whole life changed.
Mm.
And it
Wow.
doesn't, you can't fall back, but once you kind of anchor that awareness, really anchor that knowing inside of you, and you can get there, even if you might be temporarily pushed off course,
Yeah.
then that is a real plus.
Yeah. Yeah.
So, so all of that's going on, all these things are happening, and then the inside stuff starts happening, and it's like a whole universe inside of you, as well as this universe that's outside of you.
Yeah.
And during the course of the time is like learning to understand my mind,
Yeah.
how it works, how it holds you back, learning to understand the power of the heart and all the heart energy, and then moving down into what I call the well, down in the second chakra, lower Dantian area where the creative life force energy is,
Right.
and all the wounds that everybody has around that and the misuse of it.
Mm-hmm.
So moving into all of that. And that has been, a long journey in and of itself.
Yeah. Yeah. The interesting thing that about your story of her asking you, um, do you realize you're addicted to pain? I think that is uh, commonplace to an extent. And the reason I say that is because one of the things that I used to do when I was feeling a whole lot of a pain, uh, I would take stick pins that you would use for like a bulletin board, and I would cut on my arm with those. And for whatever reason, that feeling of that pain would alleviate some of that hurt that was going on in my heart. So I understand that element, and not everybody experiences that the same way, but I can relate to it from that perspective. Another thing that was interesting to me as well is when the tattoo industry took off. Um, and how everybody was just getting tattooed and tattooed and tattooed. And one of the things that I noticed for me, because I jumped into that arena too, in terms of I started getting tattoos, but when I felt that needle start to hit my skin, it almost felt like the same sensation that I was experiencing when I was cutting on my arms.
Mm.
Um, and for me, it was like, oh, wow, okay, this is something else that I can do. And it masks the fact that I need to feel some of that pain in order to alleviate that pain that's in my heart. Um, so I was able to kind of shift that. But, and again, too, it's after I didn't start getting tattoos until way past my suicide attempt. But even after that, and you start trying to heal from that type of a situation, the pain just doesn't immediately go away. You still have those residual things that are still there that haven't been dealt with. But I'm starting to get tattoos, and I'm like, okay, this is alleviating. This is helping release some of that for me, without being necessarily uh, a healing modality. It does help people heal because a lot of times people are getting something to remember some heal or hurt that they've experienced, or the loss of a loved one, or a child, or an animal, or those types of things. So it can be both. It can be healing, and it can be also a vice that you go to because you've got other stuff going on that you're not wanting to deal with. Um, and two, there's the artistic expression of it. So there's many different levels of it that I think can be true and can be different as well. It can be artistic, can be creative, and some people that are getting tattoos that it doesn't have to do with any kind of pain whatsoever. But
Right.
from my perspective, I've been able to look at it and see, oh, okay, that's what that's doing for me. Yes, it's seeing the creativity that I get to wear on my body, that artwork, that appreciation for the tattoo artist that created it, and an idea that was in my head. Now I get to see it be brought to life. But even with that, they're expensive. So if you don't have a nice chunk of income flow coming in, at a certain point, you got to stop getting those. So I have a few unfinished tattoos. But I was as you were talking, I was seeing how that the realization of that's brought up and put in front of you to look at kind of shifted some stuff. And I've noticed that within myself, that realizing that for me was another form of essentially harm to an extent, because that's part of the reason why I was getting it, was because I wanted to feel some of that pain
Yeah,
in those particular times um, of hurt that hadn't been addressed as of yet.
yeah.
So moving forward with you, now you're starting to, I would assume, shift into a different um, sense within your own body and with what you can potentially start to do for others as well. And can you expand a little bit more on that, and what now the trajectory is moving forward after these experiences?
Um, yes, but just a second. Would you
Yeah.
mind sharing with people how your heart pain has affected you physically?
Oh, it's aff- affected me across the board. I have a heart condition, literally, that is called vasovagal syncope. Um, and what happens there, so if you've ever been sitting down or laying down and you jump up and go do something real fast and you get this lightheaded feeling, or sometimes people pass out. Me, I pass out. because what happens is my heart relaxes so much when I'm in those prone positions that, um, and I jump up to go do something, my heart doesn't catch up with my body's movement. So there's that disconnect. And what happens from a physical standpoint is the change in body position into that movement, the blood has to rush back to the heart to be pumped back out to the other extremities. So that creates that shift where it's a blood pressure level change. And for me, it causes me to pass out. And that has, I still have that, but a lot of times too, the change that I believe you're talking about in terms of what the pain affected my heart and how working on that has allowed me to release some of that pain with the work that we have done, but it has also to open up my heart to being able to express more, being able to be more um, open to understanding different things. Um, even in my creative journey, it's allowed me to shift into potentially this work of being an artist lifestyle coach and um, being able to give perspective to somebody who may be struggling in the art world or the art industry or any creative field. Um, Giving my perspective of the things that I've dealt with as a creative, as a working artist over the years. Because similarly, we have a same experience in terms of going to college. I tried to go to college for art and graphic design, and then ended up dropping out as well and just dove straight into an art career. I started doing fashion immediately
Yeah.
because that was my heart's joy at that point in time. Um, but yeah, the healing journey and of the hurt that has been in my heart. And some of it is centuries old, some of it is familial in terms of carryover DNA wise, that we've been able to tap into and come to realizations of, okay, here's the origin of that. Um, and so that has been something that has been a shift that I've been able to recognize in working on those hard pains and stuff like that. The hurt that is locked in there. I mean, when we first started working with each other, I remember you asked me one time, it's like, what does the surrounding area of your heart look like? Um, does it feel like it's in a cage or in a box or whatever? And my response was I felt like it was this huge boulder, this rock that was solidified around my heart that couldn't be broken off. Um, but we've worked over and over many times with that and through that, and over the course of the years, that's been able to be chiseled down and broken off. And I believe I'm in a place. There may be a fragment or two of that rock still hanging on somewhere in there, but it's definitely not the boulder that I saw when the question was asked first at that point in time. I believe that's kind of where you were going with that question.
Yeah, well, that and just so people could see how also like whole when you have those kind of things going on, how it can actually have a physical effect in your life and how
Yes,
feeling like as you let go and come into the knowing of what I'll call truth, um, that your body kind of can come along with you.
you're right.
Like it can really start to come along with you
Yeah,
and
for sure.
you start to feel better.
Yeah,
And so but that's kind of what I wanted people to be able to see is how much carrying all of that can really affect you. And letting go of it can can change everything.
yeah, for sure.
This might be a good place just for should I was going to tell about the guy who had the history of family in the concentration camps.
Yeah, absolutely. That'd be a
Yeah,
good
he
story.
had a lot of back pain and it would never go away. And then one day he showed up and all of a sudden all these people. I had about 5 or 6 years, I guess, where people who had crossed over kept, were dead, kept showing up. And usually it was somebody that had some unfinished business, was someone who, a family member who had died. I didn't ever do this work. I never advertised it. I never tried to call it in. It just happened during the healing session. So he had all these people filling up the room. And I said to him, I said, like, all these people are coming in the room. And he said, and I started describing them. And he said, those are some of my family that died in the concentration camps. I guess because his parents had tattoos. They were survivors of the concentration camp. And he
Okay.
said, yes, they must have had pictures of these family members because he recognized when I started telling him.
All right.
And I said, and they're here. And I said, they want to tell you what their life streams were.
Oh, wow.
It's like they couldn't really rest peacefully until someone knew they had a dream.
Mm,
Like, I guess it needed to matter to someone,
yeah.
or they wanted to pass this down to their ancestors, their hopes and dreams.
Right.
And so one by one, they would tell me, like, I remember one guy was a violinist, and I can't remember the others, but I particularly remember him. And they would tell me what they did and what their hopes had been. And, they had all died. And then when we got done, his back pain was gone.
Wow.
And then the priest I used to help, he
Yep.
had pain. It's like chronic pain that you chase all over the body is a really good indication that you're dealing with something like this.
Right.
And he had that kind of pain, and he was in so much pain, you could take your fingers like this and just barely go like that across his chest, and he would scream in pain.
Oh, wow.
He was a retired priest from Ireland. And so I finally said to him one day, I said, well, Father, I think we need to do a different kind of work. He was game. He was cool. Um, and so we did this work, and I said, I'm getting something about when your father was, I did some muscle testing to ask his body, actually, and we got his father at 8 years old.
Mm,
And he said, that's when my father's father died.
wow.
And he said, and his mother had 10 children on a farm in Ireland, and she had to keep going, keep the farm running, and keep the 10 kids going
Wow.
without it.
Wow.
And then all of a sudden I had a flash of seeing his father, as a little kid, watching his mother sitting at a kitchen table, kind of breaking down for a moment.
Uh-huh.
And I could feel this fear go through his father because his dad had just died, and now he's watching his mother kind of just fall to pieces. I mean, she got it together. She did everything she needed to do. But in that moment, she was falling apart.
Right.
And he witnessed it. And I could feel all this fear go through the kid's body. And I told Father what I was seeing. And so we talked about it, and we did a release of that. And when we got done, all that pain was gone.
Wow. That's
So yeah, we don't know.
Yeah, and what's interesting with those types of stories, again, it plays into if you're not open to the past life scenario, or the fact that your body um, experiences other things outside of this lifetime. What that shows is the ancestral DNA that has continued on through the family lineage.
Yeah,
Um,
that stored that stress.
Right. Something that happened to not even you, didn't even happen to you. It happened to somebody that was in your family years ago, but yet it was so strong of an emotional and a response to that in that person that it ingrained in the DNA, and then it just got passed on and passed on again. And so I think sometimes people can't necessarily comprehend that, but if they just go and start researching a little bit of DNA, ancestral traumas, there are studies that have been done by universities, top universities across the country and the world, really, that are looking at that as an element of understanding people's problems. Um,
Yeah.
and what's been fascinating for me is because of our family background, being fundamental Baptists, and my grandfather was a Southern Baptist minister on my mom's side. Um, but when you start thinking about past lives and stuff like that, it's all forbidden because they believe you're here only once. That's it. This is this lifetime. When you die, then you go on to heaven, and that's it. Done and over with. But my intuitive knowing is that my soul is, yes, eternal, which they speak about. Yes, my soul is eternal, and it never stops in terms of trying to grow or trying to evolve. So the component of coming back into a new life or transitioning into a new life is not necessarily what they would consider quote unquote reincarnation, because you're not exactly physically the same look, that type of thing. Your soul is always the same, but you may take on different appearances coming into the next life, or taking on different scenarios where you need to learn lessons within the next life, and so on and so forth. But that I just wanted to point that out again to the audience, that as much as they may not understand the work that you do from the perspective that you do it in, there are correlations that are based in scientific study that they can look at and understand a little bit more of what you're actually talking about, in terms of that.
Yeah, and if they and that's one of the reasons I got interested in neuroscience and doing all the research in PubMed and
Yeah,
all the
yeah,
things I also do,
right,
is so that I could bridge that with people and try to give them as much as is possible. And every day more comes out a
right,
scientific explanation of why I'm doing what I'm doing or what is possible.
right,
And like reading that article the other day about the tubulins and the microtubules and how your brain can connect to all the consciousness everywhere, and they're catching some guff about their, but it's the science is starting to prove it. It's just like Bruce Lipton, the biology of belief. He
yeah,
taught at Stanford when he first started saying genes shut on and off based on your environment. It's just like you could have the gene of, like father could have the gene of the stress of his dad being fearful when, that getting stored in the genetics, but maybe it doesn't turn on until he has a lot of stress himself.
right,
And then the biochemistry in his body from the stress turns that gene on, and then all of a sudden it starts expressing. And and they're now saying something like 80% of what's happening is based on environment. Like you're not just locked in because you have a cancer gene. It's your stress and your lifestyle and everything that turns that gene on.
right.
So I know there's a YouTube video of a talk that Bruce Lipton did on that, the biology of belief. And I mean, he's just one person. There's Vessel Vanderkolk. He talks about, his book is The Body Keeps the Score. And these are all things people were coming out with back probably in the 90s, but they never really took off until really the last 10 years, the neuroscience and the body and everything. And this is stuff being a body worker that I was aware of all the time. My body workers know this stuff,
Yeah.
And years ago, there was a research in Miami. They did a whole bunch of research on massage and the benefits of massage and all this. And what they found is like there's certain chemical structures, I can't remember the name now, that line up a certain way in your cells. And when
Hmm.
you do massage, you break them up. Well, I've worked on people's bellies before and have them come up swinging off the table.
Right.
Like, you know,
Yeah.
and I, whoa, and I said, you want to tell me about that? And we would, I'd let them calm down. And then the guy said, my father used to punch me in the gut when I was little, trying to,
Mm,
uh,
mm,
all of that is stored there until you start to move it away, because people guard, you see people guard, they guard, you watch people, sometimes they walk and their shoulders and their neck is really stiff, like it doesn't move, or they guard different parts of their body. And so when you start breaking that up, all sometimes these memories can come bubbling up, these things that you've kind of stored over there.
yeah.
So it helps to look at each cell like it's got its own little brain in a way,
Right.
you
Right.
know and people aren't aware of this. They don't know anything about their bodies. We're not taught any of this. And it's pretty common knowledge now for people who are in this kind of field,
Sure.
but it's still not common knowledge for people who don't have a reason to be touching it all the time. You know
Yeah,
what I
yeah, exactly.
mean? But that the DNA thing is fascinating. But they can think of it like this. Sometimes you're in a family and the family's musical, right?
Yeah,
Like the musical gifts just keep getting passed down, or they're, things like that.
yeah,
What also gets passed down is the trauma. I mean, I have seen people who have suicide running in their family.
right. Yes,
It's
yes,
like for generations, people have committed suicide. It's crazy.
yeah,
And so it's not just like musical gifts or mathematical gifts or things like that. It's all these different kind of things are getting passed down, but
yeah,
you can change them. That's the
right.
other thing. People go, well, how do I change that? But you can change your DNA. That's one thing. Bruce looked epigenetics. That's one thing he found out,
Yeah,
and now it's pretty common knowledge. But back then, they all thought he was crazy.
yeah, yeah. No, exactly. I mean, I think that might be a good pivot point too, to us to kind of move forward to when you and I actually met, um, which was very interesting, uh, how we met, and it was through a at that time. I had come across the work of Dr. Elaine Aron, who was starting to talk about highly sensitive persons, HSPs. And one of the um, people that she had worked with, and as part of her case study, was uh, Little Jagged Pill, Alanis Morissette. Alanis Morissette was a highly sensitive person. And I think a lot of artists are. They may not just know it, but they are just instinctively because of their creative abilities. Um, but when I heard what she was studying and what that HSP was, and the fact that it was tied to being an empath or having empathy that's highly in tune, um, it started to kind of make me shift into a different thought of, okay, that sounds exactly like who I am. But all right, what do I do with that? How do I find somebody to work with that can help me explore this? And then not too long after finding her, I found this person that come across my feed in one of my social platforms, who was in England, and she was doing a webinar for highly sensitive entrepreneurs. And I was like, oh, this would be interesting. Let me sign up for it. It was a free webinar. And of course, those are usually the ways that people put out information to get you to sign up for their programs and stuff after the fact. They do a free thing to begin with, and then after that's the pitch to, work with them one on one. But what was interesting was the fact that you were on the webinar and I was on the webinar, and she asked a question, if people had anything they were wondering about, or how it might relate to their business, being highly sensitive and that type of thing. And I had made a statement, or asked a question and made a statement, and she kind of answered it. And then kind of went to a couple other people. And then you happened to say something about what you were doing um, in your business. And um, was trying to get some answers from her perspective on your business. And what hit me within that moment was, oh, wow, this might be somebody that I could potentially work with, because you gave a little bit of explanation of what you do. Um, and then I kind of, in the meantime, I went and looked at your website real quick and saw some more explanation of what you do. And after when that was over, I just reached out to you and I said, hey, we were on the same webinar together. I know you're expressing some frustration with being able to do certain things with your branding and that kind of stuff. I said, I believe I can help you. And then you kind of instinctively said, yeah, I kind of felt that we had a connection as well. And I think I can help you. And so that was a turning point for me, finding somebody who was able to see who I was, understand who I was, and was able to tap into my energy and sense where some of my pains that was creating the depression and anxiety were, that we could start working on and start trying to heal those things. And for me, it was like, oh wow, this is this is changing exponentially fast, dramatic healing experiences that you and I have worked on together. Um, and from your perspective, what has that been like, working with a creative who feels so much um, about everything?
Like working with myself. I mean,
Right. Yeah.
it's I don't have a problem understanding most of the time because I've been through so much myself, you
Right.
know.
Right.
And so there is one thing I always felt that even as a little kid, like I had this gift of like seeing the beauty in someone.
Hmm.
So that somebody told me that one time, like, God's gift to you is that you see the beauty in someone, and then the only problem is and you know them,
Yeah.
or something like that, and you go up to them, hey, and they go, who the heck are you?
Right.
Bam,
Right.
that was another thing. But I have this ability to see where someone could go, like the truth of their being. I'll put it that way. And
Gotcha.
I see all the layers they've used to cover it up, you know,
Yep.
all the thousands of different ways. And some of it isn't something they've done even consciously, like all the things we were talking about, the ancestors, everything.
For sure.
But I do, so that's what it's like for me. Like I see this and then I feel like I can maybe help you get there,
Yeah.
you know? And it really, when people start like my whole thing is not to keep you coming forever. Yeah, I mean, I know we've worked off and on together for a long time. And I think I have people that I've worked with like that in my own life. Like I'm human.
Right.
And so, and even sometimes, we have conversations together that are healing for both of us now. You know what
Yeah.
I mean?
Yes.
And that's really what it's like for me, like just trying to draw out um that that beauty inside someone. And sometimes there's some pretty fierce protectors in there, boy. You can get clobbered.
Yeah.
Hold on. I think I need to plug something in here. So I was just going to try to do it if I can see the cord. If not, nope, I can't see it. Oh well. Um, so and that came up some with you too. You had some pretty fierce protectors.
Yep.
Um, so sometimes it can be very intense.
Hmm.
I think the only way I get through some of it is because I've been through so much myself. Like
Right.
I can sit, I always tell people, like, the more you heal, the more you can sit with others going through things. Because what happens is if you reach a level of intensity or pain that someone hasn't taken their own selves through, they
Right.
check out.
Yeah.
They do not want to hear it.
Yeah.
They either take themselves out of the room, energetically away, or they literally leave.
Right.
Like they can't handle it. And then oftentimes we'll get angry or hurt by that. But truthfully, it's usually because the person simply cannot handle it.
Yeah. It's a
Mhm.
protective mode.
And you have to find someone who can maybe help you walk through that, who's been there, I think. And I don't mean read about it in a book.
Yeah.
And I think one thing about doing healing work versus going to school to be a therapist and doing all of that stuff, because I work very differently from a therapist. And I have a lot of friends who are therapists and they do good work. It's
Right.
not that. All of these things have their place,
Correct.
but I'm about loving you. You know,
Yeah.
I'm about seeing your beauty and loving you. I'm not about being a psychologist and stepping back and kind of throwing things out at you and let you tangle with yourself and then see you next week. And,
Right.
like I think I have a little more warmth in my process.
Yes.
And not that there are some therapists that are very warm. I don't mean that, but I'm more personal and I don't want to even apologize for that. And they sometimes a lot of people I've seen trained in therapy, they believe that you should not be that. And I think that has its merits too in certain cases.
Sure,
To
sure.
stand back and not, but that's not my role. My role is to be like kind of your cheerleader in a
Yeah,
way
yeah, yeah.
and to be loving support because a lot of people that I see don't have that.
Right.
Not deep, meaningful, loving support.
Yeah,
And I can't be there all the time, obviously. There's only one of me, but I try to be very present when I'm with the person. And I think about them, if I think about something I think will help you, I'll just send it off to you.
yeah,
And so some people I interact more deeply with, some people like this, but I'm I'm always trying to help you move that creativity up,
yes,
express but find how your soul wants to do it. Because, for example, with you,
yeah,
you kept wanting to go back to how you used to do it. And
yep,
I kept saying, that's not what I'm getting. And then I finally, what I did, I went and looked at your chart, and then you had Jerry look at your chart, and she told you the same thing that I was telling you is that you're not doing that in this lifetime, dude. It's got to be spiritual.
right, right,
You know?
exactly.
And I guess then you got to find a way to bring all of these gifts to your more spiritual side. And and I think you're doing it now, which is just makes my heart really happy.
Yeah, thank you for
But
that. Yeah,
watching you blossom into that has been like so cool. And but that's what it feels like. It feels like you're taking like the little kid inside, that's just been squished.
yeah,
It hasn't been supported. It hasn't been loved enough. It just needs, and oftentimes you're hating on that kid yourself.
right. Yeah,
Like you're not even liking it because it's just a pain in the ass and it's always causing you problem and blowing up your life because it wants something that you're trying to go do this other thing.
yeah,
It's gonna keep blowing things up until you embrace it.
right, right,
And so that's kind of what it's like. And then watching the creativity blossom is like just so cool.
right. Okay, nice.
Hummingbird outside right now.
Oh, awesome, awesome. I
Yeah,
love
enjoy
the
it.
hummingbird. Yep,
So
I
to
would
me,
answer.
that's what it's like.
Nice, nice. I appreciate that. And
Yeah.
to give a little bit of context there, when she was talking about the chart and Jerry, Jerry is my astrologer, and she's 94 years old this year. She's a third generation astrologer, has been doing it um, for I don't know how many years now, quite a few, 50, 40-ish, 50-ish years. And she does everything mathematically. She doesn't use a computer whatsoever to translate a birth chart, and it's all based off of the time you were born, the location you were born. So everything is longitudinal and am I saying it right? Longitudinal, latitudinal
Yeah. Mhm.
um, directions, and how that relates to the stars and the planets and different things like that. So your astrology sign and how that may um, be a map for your life and all of that kind of thing. And again, too, it's something that not everybody looks at or believes in and all that kind of stuff. But I would throw it out there, just an alternative perspective is that all of the people that traveled by boat, tying into your story,
Yeah.
years ago without having GPS or sonar or any of that type of stuff. They
Bless
had
your
to do it all.
navigation.
Yeah, they had to do it all by the stars and the sun and the planets and all that kind of stuff. So it's not something that has not been around. It's always been here. It's just a matter of using it as a different tool. But yeah, I immensely appreciate you, Marilyn. Have a love for you that's just again, it's without words what you've been to me as a friend, as someone who's helped me on my healing journey. Um, and I thank you immensely for being a part of this first episode in the Artist Recovery.
Well, I love you too. And I want to say this, it's like, people think back to the, healers and people like that are human.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Um, I, I think I always talk to you about, I can't remember the monk's name, but he said the more conscious you become, the more you feel, but the less it affects you.
Yes.
But it doesn't mean you don't feel it.
Right.
And
Exactly.
there's times when everybody goes down for the count.
Yeah.
And so just this past fall, I had one of those. I
Yeah.
remember what you said.
Yeah.
He was like, what was it you said? Oh God, if she's going down, what's
Yeah.
next?
Exactly. I was like, I always had this sense that the the amount of strength that you have and of working with me and all these years, and if something is bothering you as bad as it is, and you're having a hard time during this period, like, holy crap, it must really be bad. And it's almost like it scares me a little bit because it's like, oh crap, like, can I still potentially experience that? Which I'm sure there is that possibility down the road. Because you're when you're on a healing journey, you don't always end up getting to the place of complete healing. It's just a continuous process that you go through.
And I want to say, so one of the reasons I brought that up is like because you helped me through that. Because
Right.
what I see with you this time is like you're like really going, you're really applying yourself to all the stuff that you're doing right now. And you're not letting the little things take you down like they used to, like you just keep going and there's a happiness or something in you that I hadn't seen, since the work we did at the beginning of the fall,
Yeah.
that stuff.
Yeah.
It's come out and part of what I was feeling, I might have been like dealing with that on a bigger level but I just want to say that it's a give and take thing.
Yes.
It's not like, I'm not doing all the giving and you're not doing all the taking. Like people, we're working on this together. When I work with someone, I feel like I'm working together with you to make it a better place to be. If
Yeah.
we get better, if you get better, if I get better, if I learn more, if you can open more, like we're creating a better earth every time we do that. And that's very important to me
Right.
because we haven't even touched on like connection to all life,
Exactly. Yeah.
because most people are in so much pain they can't even think about how they connect to everything else. Like, I didn't talk about when plants started talking to me and all the things that happened with me in that realm. Maybe that's another time.
Sure.
But I'm just saying there's a whole world out there waiting for people. And that when people help you with healing, they're not the guru. I think the guru time is over, is what I'm trying to say. Like they're human too, you know, they're having to deal with being in a physical body.
Yeah.
They may be a few steps ahead of you on a lot of it, but that doesn't mean you don't have something to offer them. And
Exactly.
and that's been, our relationship. And um, so like artist people, they need to think about that. They have lots to offer. They have lots to offer the world. The world needs more beauty.
Yes.
The
Yes.
world needs more art. We've sort of become bereft of that.
Yeah. Yeah.
So to me, it's like a big circle, a big spiral, and we're all really helping each other.
Yeah. Definitely.
I wanted
Definitely.
to, because I mean, like when I saw you on that class, like I knew you.
Yes.
I knew it instantly. I couldn't figure out where from. At first, it seemed kind of medieval, but just over time, I saw several times when I knew you.
Yeah.
Um, it's just been really nice to watch it kind of like the friendship part open back up, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
and kind of, like I know you have my back and I
Right.
have your back. And I think we need more of that in the world. Like we need to understand that we can get to a point where we can kind of have each other's back. Nobody is going to be 100% all the time.
Correct.
Everybody, sometimes people are going to go down,
Correct.
and for me, it involves when I'm feeling the whole world because in astrology, my sun is right on the the in the middle of my chart at the bottom and at 0 degrees. So that means I feel everything going on in the friggin' world.
Yeah.
And so, like the way, and that's the other thing for empaths. I just want to say this because it came in my mind when we were talking, is like when you're a highly sensitive person,
Yep.
you have to get grounded and connected to the earth because at least that's my feeling. That's what I had to do. I'll say that was my journey.
Yeah.
And because I wasn't really, I was connected to water for sure,
Yeah.
but I wasn't connected to the dirt. And when I did that, I had a lot of pain in my body. A lot of things happened during that journey, but it allowed me to be able to withstand and let pass through me more and more of these energies, these super heavy duty energies, and just and not try to, because a lot of times healers will try to soak up things, and that's not the deal. You're just bringing energy to it so it can move.
Right.
It just needs to move off. But
Yeah.
a lot of us were in many lifetimes or many in the habit of always soaking up the stuff, and then we don't know what to do with it. So we're laden down with our own stuff, our ancestors, everybody, all our friends around us, we're just loaded up.
Yeah.
And so getting grounded and dealing with everything that's in those lower chakras is one way to be able to do that.
Right. Right.
And but I just hope going forward that we all learn to be gentler with each other and supportive of each other and more loving.
Yeah. I agree with that. And I think that's a great ending point that we need to be more supportive, more loving, and allow all the creatives to be able to express more and bring more color to the world. And with that, audience, always remember, be kind to your mind.
I agree.